welcome everyone. I'll give it a minute or so just to allow a few more people to join. All right, well, we'll kick off. We've got a jam-packed session for you, so I think we better kick it off so that we don't run out of time and miss out on any of the information that we want to share with you today. First of all, I'd like to acknowledge the country that I stand on today, which is Warramah country, and acknowledge the traditional owners of country throughout New South Wales. I pay my respects to their elders, both past and present and emerging. I'd like to introduce our speakers in a second. I just want to cover off some housekeeping. Obviously, we're living in a virtual life at the moment for those who are in lockdown. I'm not in lockdown yet, but I'm sure it's coming. We'd love to read your comments and questions throughout the session. We'll have some time at the end for Q&A, and hopefully our presenters can answer as many questions as possible. So to submit a comment or question, you need to be signed into the Landcare platform, and also you can type them in the comments box, and I believe Alexi will moderate those. And finally, thank you to the Australian Government's National Landcare Program for funding the Landcare Conference. I'm sure I'll be seeing a few of you in the virtual conference next month, and hopefully face-to-face next year. So let's kick things off, shall we? I've got Di Brown and Tony Parks from Northern New South Wales to talk about Big Scrub Landcare's partnership with saving our species. Welcome, Di. Welcome, Tony. Nice to see you.
Hello.
Now, I believe there's going to be a presentation.
Tony, you're on mute, by the way. Oh, that's it.
Not on mute anymore. There we go.
There we go. Di, why don't you introduce yourself?
So just, Alexi, click through a couple of the slides. Next. Next. There we go. All right.
Okay, hi, welcome everybody, and I'd just like to pay my respects as well to the Aboriginal people on which I stand today, which is currently the Gumbaynggirr country, and the project on which this is based is the Bundjalung country. And I pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging who also help us manage these lands. So our project, Saving Our Species in the Big Scrub Landcare Project, has been a long evolution. We have had a long-standing connection and liaison with Big Scrub Landcare. Big Scrub Landcare, an amazing organisation. They have been formed in 1993. Oh, actually, Alexi, can you forward one more screen, please? I'll let Tony introduce himself. Tony is an absolute legend. For those of you that don't yet know him, you are in for a treat. Tony is basically the founding member of Big Scrub Landcare and is an absolute driver of so many of these projects, and we're so lucky to be able to have him. So the Big Scrub Landcare project. The Big Scrub, for those of you that don't know about it, was the largest area of subtropical lowland rainforest in Australia, very highly diverse, and was over 75,000 hectares, was very rapidly cleared when European settlement happened to astonishingly less than 1% very quickly. So we now are basically trying to manage these incredibly important remnants across this landscape, many of them pocket handkerchief size, and some of them up to, a few hundred hectares. So basically the partnership with Big Scrub Landcare has been, like I said, an ongoing evolution, and SOS has been, I guess it's very much a two-way partnership in that because Big Scrub Landcare are so well formed and well respected and organised, it was very easy for SOS to key into those projects. So the SOS project is basically a 4-year investment of just over $600,000, with SOS contributing around $340,000, and the Big Scrub Landcare contribution is around $264,000. Could you go forward, please? Next slide. Thank you. So most of the project, I guess, is about regenerating these remnants, which has a very diverse benefit in terms of individual species, but also incredibly important to try and repair landscape function as well. And some of the evolving projects with Big Scrub are looking at more of the genetic side of things. So these projects will be very critical in helping us to increase our genetic diversity within these rainforest remnants, as well as single species. So a lot of the work going on is a massive amount of bush regeneration across a large number of remnants. There's over 56 sites that are being worked on. 23 of those sites are funded by SOS, and around 33 of those through other partnerships from Big Scrub Landcare itself. So there's a real collaboration in that way as well, with up to almost, over 755 days of bush regeneration and restoration works will be conducted in that time. Next slide, please. So the two communities that are basically being worked on, the lowland rainforest and the lowland rainforest on floodplain, are both critically endangered, and very important to work in these communities, which will also benefit many landscape managed threatened fauna and threatened flora species. So we've got around 28 landscape managed fauna species that will benefit from this project, as well as 30 site managed flora species, and of course the threatened ecological communities. That slide there is just a photo of Victoria Park Nature Reserve, which is one of the reserves that's being worked on. It's a National Parks Reserve. So there's a lot of collaboration between the different land management agencies as well. So we have parks, we have Rouse Water, we have Ballina Council, many other landholders, and private landholders as well, who are all on board trying to increase the diversity and the extent and the functionality of these species, of these communities, and our remnants. Next slide, thanks. So we also have, within this partnership project area, we have some of the biggest remnants of the Big Scrub, which are at the foothills of the border of the Nightcap National Park. I'm not sure, sorry, I didn't really talk about the geography of the area, but the Big Scrub basically extended from around Lismore over to the coast at Byron and up to the Nightcap Range. So that was its core area, and most of that's gone, but we do have some amazingly significant remnants that are part of this project as well. Next slide. Okay, so sorry, if we want to just go back one slide, I'll just let Tony in now. So I've talked about the facts and the figures and the key outcomes in terms of what we're aiming to do and what we can achieve through a partnership. I'd just like to highlight the fact that basically it's quite an easy partnership because Big Scrub are so organised and so connected with the community and the land managers in the area. So Tony, please add something there.
Yeah, I'm on Landholders country at the moment, so I'd like to pay my respects to the elders past, present and emerging. The Big Scrub restoration program, which this forms part, was launched 23 years ago. And in that time, we've looked after or rehabilitated and provided ongoing care for about 50 odd remnants in the big scrub, and about the same number outside the big scrub. When Caring for Our Country was around, there was an avalanche of money. And at that stage, we could extend our activities from Grafton up to the Queensland border. And so that was a huge benefit. This project is the second largest project we've had in that 23 years. And that's enabled us to make huge progress on a number of projects. To give you an example, Boat Harbour Nature Reserve is one of the two really good remnants on floodplain, which is itself an endangered ecological community. And the Boat Harbour is divided into two parts by a highway, and one side of it had very little work at all in its life, so it was in appalling condition. This project enabled us to make huge progress in rehabilitating the remnant, and that is really a big step forward for us in our overall program. Unfortunately, National Parks doesn't have the resources to do all of the primary and secondary and maintenance weed control, which we fortunately can raise funds for and we organise and implement. The benefit of our ongoing remnant work, the work is mainly weed control and monitoring, is the benefit to threatened species. The best example we have is that Buyong, which is another remnant on floodplain, and when we started work there in 1997, the population of a little herb called Isoglossa was 1,000. So over the next 23 years, we pay particular attention to ensuring the weeds around each individual certain species plant we cared for, and Isoglossa was no exception. The population now has gone from 1,000 to 140,000. So that's, I guess, our best example of the measurable impact on the threatened species of our general remnant care work. The program has engaged we have been involved in the 10 national parks, rainforest remnants, big scrub remnants. We look after a number of local government remnants, and the rest are private landholders. The remnants range in size from about a hectare to the largest one, which is in Nightcap National Park, and it's the old Big Scrub Flora Reserve. That has an area of about 170 hectares. We're dealing with about 300 individual trees and shrubs, and they are not uniformly distributed across the remnants because I guess the original distribution was not homogeneous. So most of the remnants would have between about 120 and 150 different species. So the weed population, when we started the Landcare group, it was really in response to all of the remnants being degraded by weeds. And there are 140 environmental weeds we have to deal with. So it's been a major effort for us, but to maintain continuity of funding has been a major problem. So we set up a thing called the Big Scrub Foundation, which raises money, and it's contributed. We had $1 million gift, so that we set up a permanent investment fund. The income from that funds the part of the remnant care program, so that smooths out the changes in government funding, which we all know is a major problem. The local community has done a wonderful job, and it's principally landholders. And recently we've had an influx of wealthy landholders who have, many of them have become aware of what happened to some tropical rainforest and have put huge resources into its restoration. So those people have been a huge benefit to us. The program is ongoing. We have deployed about 7,500 days of regeneration work over the period, and the outcomes are absolutely excellent. So I think that sort of wraps it up. Unless anyone has any questions, I can answer later.
All right, thanks for that, Tony and Di. I know it's a much beloved project, and yeah, it's one of the most amazing projects that have been around for quite a while. And I know that you guys continue to do amazing work. Not just you guys, but also the extended team up in the Northern Rivers region. So thanks very much for your time. Really appreciate it. I'm going to throw to Damon Oliver now, who is down south, southeast New South Wales, and he is going to chat about another much beloved Landcare project is the superb Parrot. Over to you, Damon.
Thank you, Tania. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. I'm speaking to you from Ngunnawal Ngambri country, and I also pay my respects to Aboriginal people, Aboriginal elders, past, present and emerging. So today I'm going to talk to you about our SOS Landcare partnership project called Saving Our Superb Parrot. And it's one that involves 5 Landcare groups working together to save one threatened species. Next slide, please. So the Saving Our Superb Parrot project has been funded by Saving Our Species for the last 4 years, and it's very much a collaborative partnership between 5 Landcare groups in the Lachlan catchment. That includes Loch Landcare, Hovels Creek Landcare Group, Borowa Community Landcare Group, Mid Lachlan Landcare Group, and the Upper Lachlan Landcare Group. But we also have other partners as well, including Greening Australia, National Parks and Wildlife Service, and the Carra Woodland Birds Group. So my role in this project really is just as the project manager or coordinator, if you like. Landcare and the other partners really do all of the on-ground work, and they do it very, very well. The key objective of our project has been to firstly try and protect mature paddock trees and remnant woodland, much of which is actually now listed as threatened in New South Wales. But at the same time, we also need to look at the future for this species. And so a lot of the work that has been done now is to also plant new paddock trees and shrubs as well for the future. And also a lot of the project has been around increasing community awareness and participation in the project. And all of the wonderful Landcare coordinators have done a great job in terms of raising that awareness and running many events. So why do we bother to save the superb parrot? Well, there's a whole lot of reasons really, but I guess firstly, it's a beautiful looking bird. It's threatened. We probably think there's less than 10,000 birds remaining in the wild. One of its key threats is ongoing loss of breeding habitat, which is old trees with hollows. And it's what we call an iconic threatened species because it's not only a very recognisable species, but it's very much loved by the community and particularly by landholders who take a very deep interest in nature on their farms as well. And so it really was the ideal subject species for this project because it really got a lot of interest and participation happening both in terms of actually landholders doing on-ground restoration works, but also other people in the regional communities who may not own a farm but might live in regional centres who are actually interested in the birds themselves and actually going out and doing some of the bird monitoring with us. Next slide, please. So just the background in terms of how this all came together, it certainly took some time to do that, and I guess it's a bit like Di and Tony's talk, that it's a long-term partnership that's developed over time, and it's really grown from connections and networks between, I guess, people like myself, local land services staff, and many of the landcare facilitators and other NRM staff across the southeast, as well as some key landholders who've obviously been very motivated for a long time to do conservation for species like superb parrot. So it was really us getting together, even before Saving Our Species came along with some funding, and starting to plot out a course, if you like, or a roadmap for what we wanted to do. And this really helped to develop that strong project that was very deliverable within the timeframes and the budget. And SOS really came along just at the right time for us, because, as you probably know, Landcare often do really have to fight hard to get funding to do this sort of work. And so SOS really came along and gave us that available funding for a reasonably long period to actually get stuff done on the ground. And I think one of the strengths of this project collaboration has been the sharing of ideas and the trust between each of the partners. It's been very collaborative and not actually competitive, which has been great. And that's really what I think has been the main reason why we've had such a successful program over the last 4 years. Next slide, please. So the total budget the Saving Our Species provided this project was around $400,000, and about 3/4 of that was divvied up amongst the 5 Landcare groups. And I guess the approach that I took as the project coordinator was that I left it up to the very capable Landcare coordinators and their landholders and members to decide what were the best management actions that worked for them in their particular area. And that flexibility allowed, I guess, different types of restoration activities in different areas, because there was quite a broad suite of on-ground actions that you can do to save the superb parrot. And having that flexibility also allowed us along the way to make some changes and tweaks as well. So if a certain type of activity like planting a stepping stone cluster or around an old paddock tree didn't work, well, we looked at other options. So that worked very well. The Landcare coordinators did a really great job in terms of getting lots of extra in-kind contributions from landholders along the way. So, for example, quite a few landholders decided to do a lot more tree planting and made up a whole lot of cattle-proof guards out of spare mesh and wire on their properties, which contributed a lot more than what we actually were able to fund. So it made it a very good value for money project. And that, just on that slide there, you can see the 5 current Landcare coordinators. I was thinking about who I might invite along today to join me, but they're also very good that it was in the time available, it was very hard to choose one. So I am speaking on their behalf today. We did actually give a talk yesterday to our own internal staff, and Linda, who's at the top of that slide, joined me in that presentation. If you go to the next slide, please. So the types of things that we did fund for Landcare were things like the fencing of remnant woodland habitat, which is important for the superb parrot. In particular, mature hollow-bearing paddock trees where superb parrots nest. But we also did plant a whole lot of new paddock trees and shrubs. A lot of them had quite expensive but very well-made cattle-proof mesh or steel mesh guards as well, whilst others actually fenced off and replanted or direct seeded corridors and stepping stones between either mature trees or patches of remnant woodland. And the other thing we did on top of that, of course, was a whole lot of promotional activities on ground, training days, field days. I think in total, in the first 2 years, keeping in mind that last year COVID kicked in, I think we did at least 20 to 30 of those events across each of the different Landcare groups. So we've certainly got the word out there across the community about just the awareness of the plight of superb parrots and also the threatened woodland birds, but also actually getting them involved, whether it was in on-ground restoration work or actually coming out and helping us count parrots. The Landcare coordinators brought a really diverse range of skills, as did each of the Landcare groups too, I must say. So, they were all fantastic communicators, but others had very good skills in things like, design, promotion, and things like developing videos, Facebook pages, websites, those sorts of things, which really helped, I think, raise the awareness and the profile of the project. So that was great to have that real mix. Others obviously have come from a very strong farming background, and they were very good at communicating and networking with the landholders in their groups and getting them to do the on-ground type work. So the Facebook page that we developed still attracts a lot of attention and interest, which has been really good. So we're hoping that this project is going to continue well into the future, and we'll have those communication tools to use into the future as well. Next slide, please. So what do we actually do in what has been only just 4 years? So despite the fact we've had 3 of those 4 years of droughts, then last year was COVID, of course, as well, in terms of a lot of the Landcare groups were restricted in what they could do in terms of planting days and things, but they still managed to achieve an amazing amount, and the statistics on that slide are only for the first 3 years. I'm actually just tallying up this year's outputs now. So this is just for the first 3 years. So we managed to get 3,000 new paddock trees with stock-proof guards planted across farms in a way that's actually connecting or reconnecting the landscape and providing long-term breeding habitat for the superb parrot. We also fenced off 60 mature paddock trees with hollows that were actually known or very likely to be superb parrot breeding habitat as well. And then other Landcare groups decided that they would actually either restore, revegetate, direct seed, remnant vegetation. So 30 hectares were actually restored from scratch, and about 25 hectares on top of that were actually fenced off. So it was actually remnant woodland that was actually protected on farms. I mean, on top of that, there's other achievements by, Greening Australia did a lot of direct seeding stuff as well. National Parks did a lot of tree planting, etc. But I'm really focusing here today on what Landcare has achieved. And I guess one of the key messages that come out of this is the way in which Landcare groups have really contributed a lot of in-kind to this project. So in the first 3 years, I've estimated that at least $160,000 of labour and cash and other cost savings were found by the 5 Landcare groups, which really made this a very cost-effective project, which has been great. And you can just see some photographs there of some of the field days that we ran, some of the days training people up to count superb parrots along the way as well at investment sites. So it's been a very enjoyable project and very successful so far. Next slide. And to cap things off, 2 years ago, we were actually nominated and won one of the awards as a best partnership project at the 2019 Landcare Conference of Broken Hill. So that really was a good pat on the back for the Landcare groups, that we've done a good job. We're certainly keen to keep going, to maintain that momentum. We're sort of waiting now to hear where Saving Our Species are heading next. We're hoping we'll get some money to continue doing the work we've already been doing, and there's more members wanting to join all the time. So there are other Landcare groups that are joining our existing Landcare partnership that would like to become part of this partnership as well. So I think it's been a fantastic example of how government and Landcare and landholders can work together and get great outcomes, not just for threatened species, but also for sustainable agriculture into the future. I think that might be it for me.
I'll unmute myself. That might help. Thank you, Damon. I know that, again, once we said before, it's one of the key projects we wanted to talk about today, and I know that you spoke about it yesterday as well. So we've wheeled you out this week to do the Superb Parrot Roadshow. But thank you for your time. I know things are very flat out, so we do appreciate you joining today. So next we have David Walker and Penny Milson to talk about their work out in the western parts of New South Wales for our beloved koalas. Welcome, David and Penny.
Thank you, Tania. I'm here in Dubbo on Wiradjuri country, and my colleague Penny Milson is up a bit further north on Gomeroi country around Tamworth and Gunnedah, Quirindi area. I often like to reflect when we talk about acknowledging country, that we're here talking about 30 years or so of Landcare and we're celebrating what's that achieved. But when you think about the land management of our nation, Landcare has been practiced by the First Nations people for tens of thousands of years. So I think we can pay tribute to that and learn a lot. I learned a lot for it, in particular, the connection they had with their land and the respect that they had for their land. But this project actually goes back to the early days of Landcare. We have next slide, please. When in the early 1990s, the Liverpool Plains, which is extremely fertile and productive farming country, encountered a number of land degradation issues. And this was the early days of Landcare, when Landcare was mostly about farm degradation. It was very much a farmer-based operation. And the issues that became apparent there were salinity, soil erosion, and loss of biodiversity. So in order to address the salinity issues, the Landcare groups there, and back in those days there were about 30 Landcare groups across the Liverpool Plains, they got to and they were planting trees very, very conscientiously. And what was noticed over the years subsequent to that, particularly after 10 or so years when the trees were starting to get bigger, was that koalas were increasing in numbers across the landscape and also spreading across into new areas. And in the history of the koalas across that area, back say 50 or 60 years ago, there weren't many koalas there at all. And gradually, we don't know whether that was because they were recovering from over hunting, or whether it was just a change of habitat that they were adapting to. But anyway, koalas were gradually increasing. In particular, it was noticed that they were utilising these 10 to 20-year-old Landcare planted trees. So when it came to looking around how we might be able to help the koalas there, it was pretty obvious that one thing we could do was to increase the coverage of trees, to add to those new trees, so that the koalas, we could connect the remnant areas and increase the areas. Please, next slide, please. Actually, I'm sorry. Can we just go back one? I'll point out. I apologise for that. The little diagram on the right-hand side of the screen actually refers to an environmental trust project that we're involved with in that area back through from about 2008 to 2010, and it involved fitting koalas with radio tracking collars to see their way across the landscape. And what that showed was that the koalas were utilising the 10 to 20-year-old trees, but they were also moving across the landscape through paddock trees and into areas of remnants. We also found out from that project that koalas often don't shelter in their feed trees, the eucalypts. They especially in hot or really cold weather, they shelter in other types of trees like wilgas, ballars, currajongs, etc. And they do that's in the day, and then they'll go into the eucalypts to feed at night. Okay, now next slide, please. So what we found was that they were using those new trees, so it was pretty obvious that a really good idea would be to increase our coverage with new trees. So the idea of this particular project, the Habitat Restoration Project, was born, and we were looking around. Saving Our Species was looking around to find a worthy partner who we could rely on to both engage with the community, recruit lots of landholders, and do a really good job of implementing it. So it was Tamworth Regional Landcare Association who expressed an interest, and I can only say the partnership's been a very good one. The photo on the right there is a fairly recent photo, as the finalisation of the project perhaps is being undertaken, and that was a gathering at Breeza Station just out of Gunnedah to celebrate the achievements, to thank the 16 landholders who have been doing all the hard work, and for the management committee, etc., all to get together and give themselves a bit of a pat on the back for what a great project it's been and what a difference it's going to make to koalas. So if I can hand across to Penny, she'll see us home.
Thank you, David. Hello, everyone. As David mentioned, I'm the Liverpool Plains Local Landcare Coordinator, and it's been a joy for me to work on this project over the last couple of years. So if we can go to the next slide, thank you. People will be able to see a picture here of our steering committee, which has really provided guidance and local ownership for this project. So the photo includes many of the members of our steering committee, including Gunnedah Urban Landcare Group, Local Land Services Northwest. We have representatives from both of the councils. Gunnedah's Project Koala, it's actually a subgroup of Gunnedah Landcare that has a special interest in koalas. I'm the representative from Tamworth Regional Landcare Association. They are my employer. David is our DPIE representative, and importantly, we have an ecologist on that group as well. So the committee has actually only met face-to-face on 2 occasions throughout the life of the project, and their role has really primarily been to assess the interest that's come in from landholders and look at the ecologist assessments and decide which projects should go forward. So in between meetings, I've kept in touch with the steering committee via phone and email, and really for me, as the person managing the project on behalf of Tamworth Regional Landcare, it's been invaluable to have this steering committee, because they've had the local knowledge and the expertise that I've needed to work with the participating landholders. So if we can go to the next slide now. Thank you. We've had 16 landholders participate across 2 rounds. So round 1 was confined just to the Gunnedah Shire. There were 5 landholders in that round. And then in round 2, we expanded to the Liverpool Plains in addition to Gunnedah, and another 11 landholders came on board. So it's been a case of giving them support through that process. Now, some of them have used the funding that they've got to help to pay for contractors to do fencing and planting and that sort of thing. But by and large, they've done it themselves. And the photo you see on screen is one of our participating landholders. They had family home at Easter this year, and so children and grandchildren, boyfriends and girlfriends were roped in to plant this particular project. I think it was 1.3 hectares. It's about 250 trees went in over Easter in this particular project. Just on the right-hand side of the screen, you'll see a photo from a field day that we had for this project. So our landholders are a very diverse group, it turns out. Some of them have extensive experience with planting farm trees successfully. Others had never done it before. So how were we to cater for their needs? Well, we had just a very short and sweet field day in Gunnedah that they were invited to attend. In advance of coming to that field day, we gave them some written material on farm revegetation, and the idea was they could bring their questions to the field day. So in the previous slide, if we can go back, you'll see that gentleman on the right is actually the chair of Gunnedah Urban Landcare Group. He has a vast amount of experience in farm revegetation and planting trees. And so he was able to answer the landholders' questions, whether that be, you know, how do I spray, or what's wildlife friendly fencing, or, you know, whatever question they had, we could try and cater for that. So if we go to the next slide, you'll see quite an interesting shot. It's an aerial view of one of our projects on Wonderbar Road, just out of Gunnedah. So it was part of a larger project that saw just over 2 hectares of new koala habitat created. So the way that this model worked is that landholders received about 50% of the estimated cost, recognising that to plant a corridor, they would need fencing, a rip, spray, play for tube stock natives, guard stakes, etc. So it's not without cost, obviously, to do this, but I think it had value in having this co-contribution model and it meant obviously we could stretch the taxpayer dollar as far as we could. So the photo on the right, I just wanted to make mention that an ecologist and myself visited all of the landholders who'd expressed interest in being a part of this project. And so each and every participating landholder had specific advice about suitable tree species to plant. As David mentioned, those shade and shelter trees are equally as important as feed trees. And our recommendation was that 60% of the corridors be feed trees, 25% be shade or shelter trees, and the remaining 15% of the plantings be shrubs, and that would actually contribute to biodiversity more generally, rather than directly servicing koalas. So typically corridors that were planted on properties were 30 metres wide. As we know, typically the wider the better when it comes to supporting biodiversity and native species. And some of the examples of species that were put in will be familiar to people on this webinar who know what koalas like to eat. You know, box trees, river red gum, tumbledown red gum, and then of course the shade and shelter trees that David mentioned, like wilgas and currajons, in addition to the shrubs. So well, if we move to the next slide, you can actually see a little bit of a summary on the left-hand side of this project. You can see the figure there of $134,000, which Tamworth Regional Landcare Association has to play with to manage this project, and we've really tried to make that stretch as far as possible. In the contract, we were required to put in 30 hectares, but as you can see, we've achieved 45 hectares. And I think there's been some cost savings because I'm a land care coordinator. So, you know, my wages are paid anyway. So within my time as a coordinator, I've been able to manage this project. I'd like to make mention of my predecessor, Lana Andrews and Ali Chaffee, who were had this role prior to me coming on board almost 2 years ago. And yeah, so the project, as I said, has involved 16 landholders, and mostly it's involved planting new corridors. In one or two examples, they've actually fenced off some remnant vegetation and tried to value add to that. I thought I'd like to share with you some feedback from a cropper at Emerald Hill who felt that, you know, for years they'd wanted to plant trees. They loved their koalas, but really it was a pretty easy job to put off when you're running a business. So these comments come from Peter at Emerald Hill. He says, the Saving Our Species funding has been much appreciated. However, we found just as much value in the deadline and accountability that signing a contract provided. Forced us to act on something that we actually already wanted to do, but may have taken a number of years to become a priority under the normal stresses of running a business. The experience has been extremely satisfying. We're proud of our completed corridor and we look forward to watching it grow. So I think it's been a rewarding experience for the participating landholders. It's been enormously rewarding for me as a land care coordinator. And I think the beauty of this project is that landholders haven't had any paperwork pain, shall we say, in participating. Their expression of interest was a one-page form. We visited all of them, as I mentioned, with the ecologist, and then it was really up to the steering committee to determine if those people and their projects would have value for koalas. So there were lots of highlights, and I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to share the success of this project. Thank you, Tania.
Can I just finish off our little segment by saying that government programs like Saving Our Species can have very high ambitions to make changes, get plannings done, have conservation activities implemented. But particularly in landscapes like the Liverpool Plains, where it's pretty well all productive farmland, all privately owned, to get the sort of engagement that we need to have things happening on private land, the partnership with a local group that has trust and credibility with the local community like Landcare is absolutely essential, and that's been a key part of the success of this project.
Absolutely, David. I think everybody agrees that the passion and dedication that comes from Landcare groups across New South Wales and indeed across Australia is known by, I'm sure, thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, if not millions. But it really is a testament to the hard work that all of you do in the regions. You've had drought, you've had fire, you've had floods, we've now got a global pandemic. I mean, what's next? Aliens? So to be able to sit here and talk about some of those wins and how the community is responding to the great work that you guys do, both from a Landcare and SOS perspective, has been really nice to be reminded of those. And I will say there's actually 25 active projects across New South Wales that Landcare groups are involved with. We have a great relationship with the peak body as well, and we continue to do great work and welcome any newcomers along to try to build our network within saving our species. So if you'd like to know more, for those listening today, by all means get in touch. Now I'm just going to throw to a couple of questions with the 10 minutes or so that we've got left. If you don't mind sort of answering round the room, I'll just go as my screen is in front of me. So David, you'll be first cab off the rank. In your opinion, what has been the highlight for you working on this particular project?
Well, I think the highlight has been the way Tamworth Regional Landcare has been able to over-deliver in terms of the area of revegetation that's been undertaken. Now, we asked for 30 hectares and we got 45.
Yep, absolutely. Penny?
Well, a highlight for me as a Landcare coordinator that was, reasonably new, only starting in 2019, is that I've been able to develop relationships at the local level with landholders through such a positive project. It's obviously a joy when they send me photos of koalas that they see, or I see one when I'm on their property. It's also bringing landholders closer to Landcare. So I can think of at least 2 examples where landholders have now joined Gunnedah Urban Landcare Group and are volunteering their time in a local nursery. So it's actually strengthened those linkages locally, and there's an opportunity then for like-minded landholders to come together, and all of them have expressed interest in receiving more education about native species and wildlife and how they can support them on their farms.
Fantastic. Damon, how about yourself? What's been the highlight? I know there's probably lots to think about, but if you had to pick one.
Okay, well, I think the on-ground achievements speak for themselves, but for me, it's really being better connected with these amazingly talented and dedicated and motivated Landcare groups and coordinators, and the landholders themselves are great to work with. And I've also seen the expansion of some of these individual groups, I think partly as a result of an influx of money and actually having a very targeted project to work on as well. So there's the membership in some of the Landcare groups that we work with has actually expanded in the last 4 or 5 years, which has been great.
Fantastic. Di, how about you? What's been the highlight for you?
I'd have to agree with what Damon said a lot, in that it's just so energizing and invigorating to work with people that are so passionate about what they know and what they love. And, in a way it puts us to shame. Not us, but, I always feel like there's so much expertise and knowledge out there that we can tap into. And it's just always a privilege working with people like that. And it really does keep you going in the face of adversity at times. So, yeah, it's been great. I've been involved with Big Scrub on and off for a long time, and it's always nice when evolution comes around again and, I get to reconnect with all those amazing people up there.
Absolutely. And Mr. Parks, I've got 2 questions for you. So one, in your opinion, what has been the highlight over the past 3 years working with the SOS team, but also how the current projects fit into the long-term plans for Big Scrub?
Well, I think there are 3 major issues I'd like to mention. One is the fact that Big Scrub Restoration Program a big boost because of the size of the program. And the fact that we went for 4 years meant that we could do good planning, and we were able to achieve all of the outcomes that we set at the outset. Secondly, we have been able to develop a great relationship with the SOS people, and I think that's going to be very valuable in the future, particularly as we have the leading ecological restoration project that involves looking at the genomes of certain species and using that information to come up with in effect, a living seed bank of the collection of individuals that have the best genetic diversity to survive climate change and the threats. So they were the two major items. The third thing was we were able to engage the four landholders and we strengthened that relationship with Western.
Sorry, Tony, I'm on mute. Thank you for that insight. The sound was a little bit shabby, but I do definitely get your sentiment, and I know how passionate you are, and you're a bit of a rock star up in the Northern Rivers. Everybody knows Tony. So I'm sure that there'll be many more times to talk about what's in store, especially now with SOS moving into the next phase for the next 5 years. So there will definitely be things to talk about in the future. Now, I just wanted to throw to you guys, was there anything else you wanted to touch on before we wrap it up today? Are there any more questions that you'd like answered?
Yes, Tania, if I may, one of the big issues we faced was the drought. I've lived in the west of New South Wales all of my fairly long life, and the years from 17, 18, 19 were by far the most severe and longest drought conditions that that I've ever experienced, and that have been in people a lot older than I talk about in living memory. So the way we were able to work with Tamworth Regional Landcare to hold back and trying to get the project implemented under those completely impossible conditions worked out really well, because I was confident that when the season turned around, they and the landholders will jump in and get it done, and that's exactly what happened. So to have a really good relationship and trust between the implementers and the funder, as we had, is really important, and it ended up working out really well.
Wonderful. Well, I can see the smile in your face, David. I know how proud you are of the work that you guys have done out in the West, and we're very proud of you also, as are we proud of all of our regional staff and all of our statewide staff and everybody that's fighting the good fight of conserving what our beautiful natural environment we have, and hopefully over the next 12 months we'll have a lot more positive and successful stories, and hopefully we'll never hear the word COVID again. I know that's optimistic, but we've got to remain optimistic, don't we? All right, well, I think that's about it for everyone. I'd like to thank all of the presenters today. Really, really appreciate your input with the webinar PowerPoint, the time that you've taken. I really appreciate it. I know it's difficult to try and get all these things turned around in a short time, but I hope to see all of you at the virtual conference next month. And we'll be circulating an email for those who have registered with a link to the recording of today's session for those that have missed it or you want to share. And also keep an eye out on Landcare's social channels and newsletters for some more info on the conference webinars and the ever-evolving virtual versus reality life that we lead. And so from me, I'll sign off. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Alexi, for being the little webinar bug in the background. I don't know what your official title is, but we really appreciate all your help today, and hope everyone has a lovely afternoon.
Thank you, Tania.
Thanks, Tania.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Tania.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone.